Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the endless tapestry of human behavior and looking at how scientists mathematically map the underlying structure of, well, exactly who you are. If you've ever wondered why you naturally gravitate towards certain hobbies, or why some people just absolutely thrive in complete chaos while others need strict, rigid routines, you are in the exact right place. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be decoding the Big Five, looking at the power of trait facets, exploring the famous person-situation debate, uncovering everyday clues to your personality, and finally, seeing what happens when traits meet social learning. But before we get into the hard data, let me ask you something. Do you behave completely differently hanging out with your friends than you do sitting in a strict university classroom? Take a second, think about it. Keep that specific scenario in your head as we get started, because answering that question, that's actually the key to understanding modern psychology and the incredibly complex layers of your own identity. Section 1. Decoding the Big Five, the core framework. Let's trace the evolution of trait psychology, starting with what is absolutely the definitive cornerstone of the field. For decades, psychologists operated on this idea that critical human differences are naturally recorded in our language. So early researchers did something amazing. They mathematically condensed thousands of descriptive dictionary words into one universal acronym, OCEAN. That stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Prominent researchers like Paul Costa and Jeff McCrae refined this vision, proving that these five independent structural dimensions effectively map out the entirety of humanity's baseline personality types. It's kind of like the ultimate DNA of our behavior. Now, here's the crucial point. You don't just fit into a rigid box. Personality isn't some online quiz where you find out you're entirely type A or exactly one specific type of bread, right? Instead, we exist on continuous distributions. Massive population samples show that we all naturally cluster somewhere along the statistical middle of these continuous scales. So, you might lean a little toward being extroverted, but you aren't completely devoid of introverted tendencies either. These stark contrasts play out really clearly across the spectrum. For extroversion, you've got the wildly energetic life of the party on the high end versus the quiet, reflective reader on the low end. For conscientiousness, it's the meticulous color-coding calendar planner versus the hedonistic risk-taker just flying by the seat of their pants. Or for openness, the curious, untraditional artist versus someone who deeply loves familiar routines. Every single one of us lands on a specific point across all five of these dimensions, and that creates your own totally unique psychological fingerprint. But these aren't just abstract academic concepts. They dictate real-life choices. Check this out. A 2010 study using the plagiarism software Turnitin proved that these specific dimensions are powerful predictors of real-world behavioral choices. The researchers found that students who score lower in agreeableness, which means they're less cooperative, and lower in conscientiousness, meaning they're a bit less disciplined, are statistically far more likely to cheat or plagiarize. So your structural trait dimensions are literally influencing things like your academic integrity. Crazy, right? But wait, humans are complicated. Can you think of a time when you acted completely out of character compared to how your family usually describes you? Maybe you're generally known as the quiet one, but out of nowhere, you took aggressive charge during a family crisis. To understand exactly why that happens, let's see how this builds into our next level of analysis. Section 2. The power of trait facets. Zooming in. Broad traits provide an excellent global summary, but they often obscure those critical internal nuances. The big picture isn't always the full picture. That's where the facet approach comes in, which basically breaks a broad trait down into pieces. Extroversion, for example, actually divides into distinct slices like warmth, assertiveness, and excitement-seeking. This granular profile explains exactly why you might be highly social and gregarious at lively parties, but feel completely terrified when you're forced to speak assertively in public. You can score really high on one specific facet, but very low on another, all within the exact same global trait. And this granular level of detail, it is absolutely vital for predicting major life outcomes. A 50-year longitudinal study from 2011 demonstrated that while looking at broad neuroticism is somewhat useful, the specific lower-level facet of impulsivity is the absolute strongest predictor of weight fluctuations and BMI. In fact, individuals who scored in the top 10% for impulsivity weighed significantly more on average. It's those micro-level facets that are driving your everyday health choices. Let's take a quick breath here and let Walt Whitman's thought resonate. In all people, I see myself, none more and not one a barleycorn less. It's just a beautiful reflection on how we all share these core psychological building blocks, even as they combine to make us wildly different. Keep this shared humanity in the back of your mind before we tackle a major intellectual plot twist in the field of psychology. Which brings us to Section 3, the person-situation debate, the plot twist. Okay, so during the late 20th century, the renowned psychologist Walter Mischel ignited a fierce battle by asserting that global personality traits are largely an illusion. Yeah, literally an illusion. This kicked off the legendary person-situation debate. Mischel pitted the idea of stable, context-free internal traits directly against the idea that we just react to immediate rewards and risks in our environment. He argued that human actions actually lack cross-situational consistency. Basically, he was saying a student might cheat on a math exam, but then strictly follow every single rule on the basketball court. The situationists argued that the deep context of the moment matters way more than some abstract personality score. And to be fair, they had a compelling point. A 2012 report confirmed that situational engineering, like changing the formal rules of a company or shifting a school's overall culture, is often just as effective at shaping human success as targeting someone's internal dispositions. The environment you're in dramatically influences the choices you make. But trait psychologists, they didn't just throw in the towel. They went looking for proof. So I have to ask you, if a complete stranger looked around your bedroom right now, what secrets would your clutter reveal about your personality? Well, we are going to answer that right now as we resolve this debate by looking for physical evidence. Section 4, Everyday Clues to Personality, Physical Evidence. It turns out, internal traits absolutely do exist, and they manifest incredibly clearly in our everyday choices and our personal environments. In a highly innovative 2002 study called A Room with a Q, researcher Samuel Gosling proved that physical environments, like college dorm rooms, contained this undeniable behavioral residue. Total strangers were actually able to accurately rate students' personalities based entirely on the physical footprint of their dorm room, evaluating things like their books, their wall art, and their overall level of organization. The physical clutter literally gave away their internal traits. No way around it. As the saying goes, the outward appearance is the infallible mirror of the mind. We see this all the time. Highly conscientious people consistently maintain neat spaces and show up on time. Highly extroverted people naturally seek out vibrant social spaces. These subtle, repetitive actions serve as highly visible, measurable markers of your underlying profile. Your traits are bleeding into the physical world around you every single day. Moving on to Section 5, Traits Meet Social Learning, the Synthesis. So how do our baseline traits and our environments ultimately collaborate to build the adult you? Well, it happens in 3 steps. Think of core biological traits as your foundational clay. Step 1, your genetic predispositions set your baseline. Step 2, you encounter continuous cultural feedback, rewards, and punishments from your parents and your peers. And finally, step 3, that raw clay is carefully sculpted into highly contextualized social skills and refined behavioral strategies. A really fascinating 2019 study highlighted this perfectly by looking at modern digital environments. The data showed that while introverts naturally have a baseline biological preference for solitude, they learn through environmental reinforcement to use social media to carefully regulate their connection with others. Basically, they satisfy their learned social needs but remain in an environment that protects their trait-level comfort. It's a perfect synthesis of an internal trait and a learned social strategy. The famous behaviorist B.F. Skinner once boldly claimed, "Give me a child and I will shape him into anything." Now, while Skinner's purely situational view is seen as quite extreme today, modern consensus, like the 2015 APA Handbook, actually confirms that early family feedback loops permanently sculpt the expression of our raw personality dispositions. Your self-regulation and attachment patterns are deeply molded by exactly how safe and validated you felt in your early environment. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to consider this final thought. Did you learn to manage your natural emotional anxieties by watching how your parents handled tough crises during your childhood? Take a moment to reflect on how your own foundational traits were molded by your personal history. Think about how the Big Five echo through your actions, and consider deeply what your everyday habits are projecting to the world right now. Thanks so much for exploring the science of who we are with me.